The seventh sword resides in a small temple on the outskirts of a lake, and people who have visited it have reported seeing in the late hours of the night the blade floating around on its own, and emanating a beautiful angelic light. Others have even stated that they've heard a song resonating from it. Now, I will say that I have visited the sword twice now. The first time was a few years back. You all remember that. It was just right before I died. And I did see it floating around, and I saw a bright white light, but I didn't know whether that had been a dream, or whether it had been a trick of the Abbey. Maybe they had just used fishing wire to make it look like it was floating around, or whether it was a magic sword, because that is always a possibility. But I actually did visit the Seventh Sword just a few months back when I went on a trip to Maine with my sister Corey and my mother and father. And I admit I didn't see anything unusual this time. The sword was just there under a pane of glass, and the people at the Abbey had said it had been quiet here recently. But it leaves an impact on you. There is something about that sword, and it is a treasured object here at the Fireside Tales, which got me thinking of some of the other treasured objects we have here, because over the course of the thousands of years of existence of this organization, we have collected quite a few artifacts, and I just wanted to tell you all a little bit of their history. Now, not all of these are from the Fireside Tales. Some of them are from out there. But I think that this stuff is very interesting, and we've done pretty well with these encyclopedia episodes. They're very informative, and they're very fun, especially for me to do, because I just love talking about this sort of stuff. So we will begin with the swords. As you know, there is the seventh sword, but there is, did you know this, actually 12 swords. And no one's sure where they came from, but the most commonly accepted explanation is that before the beginning of the universe, there was the Great Truth, and the Great Truth created 12 swords. All of the 12 swords were originally swords of good, but there was a falling out at some point, and some of the swords became evil, as I'm going to explain. But the first sword belongs to the Great Truth. No one has ever seen this blade, and it's believed that only at the end of the world will the blade finally come back into existence upon this world, or some other place, in the immortal realm and not in the divine place where it currently resides. The second sword belongs to the Great Lie. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking the Great Lie is an evil thing. We don't know. I don't pretend to understand what it is. I will say this, that it's not a bad theory that the Great Lie is evil, but it might not be the whole story. The third is a sword held by what some people say is Lucifer. He had a falling out with God, and the sword of goodness was consumed in darkness. The fourth sword belongs to one of the seven, like the first sword. It belongs to the Grim Reaper, who puts it, you wouldn't actually see it on him. He puts it in his own stomach, and when he pulls it out, it is a blade of pure ice. Now, this sword is neither good or evil. It has become intermingled between the two. And there isn't much known about it, as there isn't much known about any of these swords. The fifth sword has a very odd place right now. Originally, it belonged to one of the angels, but it was given to a spirit, Poseidon. And it was given to him because he was so well connected with all three of the divine ones, the man in black, the man in gray, and the man in white. I don't understand exactly why they gave him the sword. It seems like a big thing to give just a simple spirit of the water, but I think it was for partially protection for the spirit realm, so that they could always, be able to fight against any great evil that might come across the world. The sixth sword is held by another one of the seven, the demon Nomad. And this sword was originally owned by one of the angels too, but it was one of the angels that went with the owner of the third sword, and it has been consumed by darkness now. With the demon Nomad having it in its hands, I'm pretty sure it has gone even colder and darker, and become even more powerful. I will say this, I don't know how the demon Nomad got it, whether he was just given the sword by the Divine One, or he killed the Divine One. Either one is possible, but it's lost to the histories. The seventh sword, we already know a lot of the stories there. It's handled by a hero. It belongs to the mortals. It belongs to the mortal realm. Not only the mortals here on Earth, but of other worlds. It gets passed on from world to world whenever there's a great time of need. The eighth sword and the ninth sword belong to fallen angels as well. Now, I don't know where they are currently. The prevalent theory is it's still with those fallen angels, but that's up in the air right now. The 10th, 11th, and 12th sword belong to three angels and still exist in the divine realm. I think you all will recognize these names, although there's debate about whether these three individuals actually own them or whether they have different names. It's all very complicated. A lot of mystery here at the Fireside Tales, but who we believe owns them, are Gabrielle, Michael, and Martin, the angels. So that's the history of the swords. There's a lot to get through, but I thought it was very interesting. I thought you all might like to know a little bit about their history. The next objects are the ones that belong to the Fireside Tales that we have in our possession and we keep down in the basement. Now, the first thing is the toy soldiers, which are the guards of all these objects. They wander around the alleyways of the basement, and they're known to shoot on sight. No one is supposed to be down there without clearance. I wouldn't mess with those toy soldiers. They have a lot of ego, and you might think that you could take them, but trust me, you couldn't. They're very tough. There is also the shard of glass from the mirror that is supposedly a looking glass into Morgog. We can only see a part of Morgog in there. We don't got a lot of information. But we always are afraid that it's going to cause some sort of wickedness. Then, of course, we do have two books currently at the basement, although they're usually at the Fireside Tales library. The Book of Death, which allows a person to kill an individual that's far away, that they may not be able to get to. And this has to be done by killing 13 people. You have to sacrifice 13 people in order to kill someone that you really want dead. This book's only been used once before. We hope that it will never be used again. It's safe here, at least. Not necessarily a book of evil, though. That's where the story gets complicated, but I won't get into that. Then there's Captain Crooked's How to Cheat Death. Again, not a book of evil. Its origins are very strange, and I probably will end up telling you the story at some point. I have to get to it. But the Captain Crooked's How to Cheat Death, I hate to tell you all this, and I was actually a little bit afraid to, but you all have seemed very, well, you've handled all of this very well, and I feel like I need to reward you somehow. So I will say that Captain Crooked's How to Cheat Death is not just a book on how to live forever. It is also a book on how to stop death entirely. It is a book that can tell you how to make it that death doesn't occur in this world. It's a book that tells you how to kill death. It is a book that can heal the sick, that can bring the dead back to life. If the word is death, it can do pretty much anything to it, which is why we are very careful with it here at the Fireside Tales. And there is, of course, not at the Fireside Tales, but Lucinda's daughter, which we hope to get in our possession at some point, but not too much is known about it, and we only have a few scant pictures and a story, which we are inclined to believe and have every right to, since it's pretty much been proven at this point. But there is also some other fascinating items. We have a remote control that can change an object's color. We have a gate that supposedly opens into another place. And now I'd like to go ahead and move into the things that are out there. You all have here recently seen the cloth of the Godless. Now, what's behind this cloth is a mystery to this day. We don't know. There is reports that people have seen strange things happening behind the cloth. Usually it's just a man that looks like he's behind there. But they've also seen, like, dinosaurs, the shadows of dinosaurs behind the cloth. They've seen monsters, they've seen armies marching forward, heard all sorts of strange noises, and always mentioned how they've been tempted to pull the cloth away and see what's behind it. But no one, as of yet, has been brave enough to do that. And then we get to the Knife of the Godless, which allows a divine one, like the Man in Black, Man in Gray, Man in White, Grim Reaper, all of those, to kill themselves. And only they can do it. It can't be someone else striking the knife into that individual. They've tried to figure out ways to trick the individual to knife themselves. Believe me, the Seven have done that quite a lot in the history. It never works. These creatures have worked very hard to make sure they don't die, and they know how to get around. It might be that at some point something died, but that's just getting into territory that I just don't want to even begin to cover. But you see, that's the problem here at the Fireside Tales, I find. I'm always asking myself, should I tell you all this, or should I keep it secret? And there is things that I just don't want to tell you, and I do feel, though, also a responsibility to tell you some things. I feel that's my duty as the storyteller. So it's just a matter of thinking to myself, what can I trust you all with? And so far I feel like I've done a good job. I feel like you all have learned a lot. You're growing and you're beginning to understand how complicated of an existence it is. And hopefully also how wondrous.